Hey guys, and welcome to my Week 11 reactions and thoughts of each game. Quite a crazy weekend, to say the least. Starting off, we had what I said was my game of the week, mainly because of the implications of the same division. And looking at this game, you think the Ravens have a good shot. And they definitely did. They missed on a lot of chances. Their defense played like how they should play, not letting Russell Wilson really, do that much. Same with the run game and holding to every wide receiver on the other team to less than 100 yards. And then, Lamar Jackson did have a very off game. It wasn't very good early. They didn't run the ball crazy well. I mean, I guess Derrick Henry had a 5 yard average, but they only ran it with him 13 times, which was one thing that I was curious about. I was like, you're not so out of the game that you can't run with this guy. And he was doing well. And of course, Lamar had a few big runs and that sort of thing. But I look at this game, and overall, I think it's somewhat of an anomaly because Tucker doesn't miss one field goal very often, let alone two. And if he had made one out of those two, we're probably talking a completely different game where the Ravens, probably have had won because Russell Wilson didn't play very well. Neither QB very well, this game. People had been boasting up about Russell Wilson and how, oh, this is such a good. Is he back, or like is the Russell Wilson of old back? I was saying it. I think that the reason why Russell Wilson can do well in any system is with a strong run game. Weapons that are good for deep balls like Pickens, Williams, and that sort of thing. Solid tight ends and a defense that is just usually not going to let up a lot of points. We haven't seen the Pittsburgh give up a lot of points this year. So look, my overall thoughts on this game is that you feel bad as a Ravens team because you should have been able to win, and as the Steelers, Tomlin's happy with the win, but I'm sure he's like, "Oh, I've got a lot of questions about what I can do to make my QB, perform better against who many have said is a terrible Ravens defense against the pass." But these divisional games are always funny. This wasn't the only divisional game that was kind of like, what in the world is happening this week? But that's overall my opinion on this game. Lions Jaguars, not much to talk about. The thing that I don't understand is that while the Jaguars aren't a very good team, you leave Goff in like the whole game. He throws for 400 yards. You even put in Hendon Hooker, who, at the very end of the game, and for whatever reason, he has passes. Imagine if in a world you look at Goff, and I saw in a couple of the highlights guys coming at him from behind. Imagine if one of those, and it's less likely to happen because of the way that fines and flags are in the league. And I wouldn't say the Jaguars have malicious players, but imagine if someone had landed on Goff from behind and broke his collarbone. And then for the end of the season, yeah, you're 9-1. You can't, have a losing record, but you're more than likely not going to be able to sustain, the level of success you've had without Goff. And you essentially would have to become a very run dominant team, which I'm not saying they wouldn't be able to do, but they're a well balanced offense and you don't want to ruin that. But looking at this game, I'm just like, if Peterson had a shred of coaching in his mind, he still wouldn't allow this amount of points. You have the talent on your team, but it just seems to me like, the Jaguars have fallen so far over the edge that it's like it is time for a culture change. And oh, they still haven't fired Peterson. I don't understand it with the Jaguars. It's ridiculous. Rams Patriots. Interestingly enough, this game was pretty close at the beginning. The Rams were losing. They're able to pull ahead. Stafford, playing a solid game, obviously. And then even Drake May having a really solid game. One interception, unfortunate, but overall, this is a really good sign, I think, for the Patriots that Drake May is playing well. He continues to perform, every single game. The running game, it wasn't the best. Drake May even scrambling a little bit, but he's distributing the ball really well. And of course, we have the Rams who, they've obviously had their weapons back, but they've had some kind of back and forth weeks where it's like, oh, games we think that they should win, they lose and they don't perform well. And then games that, they should win. Like, obviously, this was kind of a must win. Obviously, in their division, so crazy. 3 teams at 5 wins through week 11. And then you have the Cardinals. But overall, kind of a crazy game. Obviously, it's kind of what you expect when Puka and Cooper are both healthy. They each have the potential to have over 100 yards with a guy like Stafford. And good run game, with Kyren and Corum, the 2 running backs for, the Rams. So overall, just a very sound game. I mean, their offense definitely stutters a bit on the Rams, which scares me. But they have 3 clear, like I'll say it, elite level talent with Puka, Kyren, and Cooper. But yeah, good win for the Rams, and I would say the Patriots at least are competing. It could be a lot worse. Saints Browns. I was completely wrong about this game. I thought the Browns with their defense would be able to hold the the Saints, because obviously you have Derek Carr, but Derek Carr plays an incredible game, sacked only 1 time, and that sort of thing. And I mean, and it's crazy to me that you only get 14 points when Jameis Winston has 395 yards. Like, it is crazy to me. And he's sacked 3 times, but he's able to just keep on, balling it out. But Judy with kind of an emerging game, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, popping off again, with a 71-yarder, where he was missing catches like that last year from Patrick Mahomes. It's really bizarre. The Saints, I'm not sure, maybe in their division, there's still a little bit of hope of running the table. Just because you have the Falcons, who were the division leader, now they've lost 2 straight. And I'm not saying it would be easy for the Saints, but you win out, maybe you get in. You have 7 losses, you're a few games below 500. Could be a crazy end of the season, potentially. But 1 loss does probably, defeat that kind of rally at the end of the season for them. Colts, Jets. This is why I said to start Richardson. Richardson, who, like I said, he throws, good footballs at times. Yeah, he makes some kind of boneheaded, young player mistakes, but it's like, what was this? His 11th start, I believe, this game. His 11th start. So he doesn't even have, like, a full, like, season game, technically. Like, he's, or whatever you want to call it. Like, he doesn't have a full season's worth of games, under his belt. Aaron Rodgers, crazy bad at the beginning. It's so bizarre to me. It does remind me, I mean, with Rodgers, even near the end of McCarthy's tenure, even with LaFleur, they would have slow starts to games. But now, him popping off late in the game, obviously too little too late. The crazy thing that I thought is, how did Jonathan Taylor get held to such low yardage? He was going to be kind of the reason why I thought that they would win on the Colts, but it was Richardson, as everyone knows. And he threw the ball and he spread the ball around. Like, he had 272 passing yards and not a single 100-yard receiver. Finally, Devontae kind of gets going for, the Jets or whatever. But it's like I said, I'm not believing in this team. They put up a good amount of points this game, but I don't know. There's just an inkling in my mind that some of these players maybe don't want to play for the team. They're just too sporadic. They're too sporadic, but props to the Colts, who can still be competing for a wild card spot potentially. Vikings Titans. The Titans kind of played the Vikings close. Near the end they started to put up points, and that sort of thing. I thought there could potentially be a comeback, but there obviously wasn't. Will Levis did carve up the Vikings D quite a bit, 295 yards off of only 17 completions. Did get sacked 5 times, still threw a pick, which is unfortunate. But Will Levis, proves that he can, work through this adversity, even on a team that is essentially at this point playing for nothing. Maybe their jobs and that sort of thing. And he did it without a run game, too. He was their leading rusher with 18 yards. It's insane. But, Westbrook, Akine, good game for him. And, they need to kind of establish a rapport. So next year, he's got a good rapport. And obviously Calvin Ridley, he kind of already has one with him. Tyler Boyd, I think that, the longer, obviously this is his first year in the system. And obviously he was a good, wide receiver that Cincinnati just, they couldn't pay and they couldn't keep, but I think he's still, will get his catches and will get his yards and is a smart player. But the Tennessee Titans really just need to build on games, for next year. And I think, props to them, because I think their defense is pretty much ready. They just need to establish rapport on offense and, address the offensive line in the offseason. But the Vikings, no running game really to speak of. Terrible average. And then Jefferson and Addison only combining for 142 yards, offensively. And I mean, Darnold did distribute the ball around a lot. But you'd think off of 8 targets to Addison and as well as 8 targets to Jefferson, you'd have more than 9, completions with 18 of the targets going to those two. And that just doesn't scream to be a good thing for me when you don't have a run game, come the postseason. Because the Vikings are more than likely at this point going to make the postseason with only 2 losses. Moving on to Dolphins Raiders. This didn't surprise me. I'm surprised that they had Gardner Minshew throw it 43 times. Tua Tagovailoa did very well. Not shocking. And then you have, Devin Achane and Malik Washington really kind of balling in the run game. Obviously, Malik Washington only 1 rush for, 7 yards, but I think that, from what I've noticed, whenever one reason I bring it up is that the Dolphins, they tend to just be able to plug and play these running backs. Obviously, Mostert and Achane are kind of their, above average guys that are going to get the touches mostly, but Mostert obviously did it was kind of rough for him, but the Dolphins just have so many guys that it's like, oh, what are we going to get with this dude? And obviously Mike, their head coach, just puts these guys in a position to succeed more often than not. But, good win for the Dolphins. Obviously a must win, because you lose this game, and I really think that your playoff hopes are snuffed. Moving on to Packers Bears. Of course, I was happy with the way Love was throwing it. It was kind of a silver lining to me that even though he extended his, his game streak where he's had, an interception over so many games, that interception to me doesn't happen unless he's at full strength. It's kind of a silver lining, a coping to, for me, obviously, as a Packers fan, that he wouldn't be able to put that much under it ordinarily to make it so that a guy like Kraft couldn't go up and get it at all. The other kind of silver lining in this game to me, and there wasn't obviously much to be proud of as a Packers fan, was Christian Watson finally emerged, and the Packers didn't shoot themselves in the foot, which I feel like would have been easy to do if this had been the team before the bye. Committing penalties, just dumb things, shooting yourself in the foot. I think that, it's a sign that, you really are. I mean, if the Packers play like this with minimal penalties, yes, we had the Xavier McKinney personal foul, which I think was, obviously I have bias, but it's like he barely touched Caleb Williams. And Caleb Williams looked like he was going to try and maybe make a move inside. It's one of those that under the ref's discretion, I feel like, oh, you don't call that. Like, it wasn't malicious at all. It's not like he was flying out of bounds to put a hit on Caleb. Now, in terms of the Bears, here is what my issue is with the Bears, and I've made this clear a number of times. Caleb Williams does not throw it down the field consistently well. I remember at the end of the game, they showed some of his highlights, and it was like 4 highlights. And one of them was the DeAndre Swift where he, ran down, the left of the sideline. When Caleb essentially did a dump off pass to him. Another one was obviously the pass to Odunze, and then another pass to get them even closer when they were trying to, get in range for their final field goal. And there were several, and I counted like 4 plays where he was, like the throw to Keenan Allen, where Keenan Allen was well defended by Quay Walker, and it was batted to the ground, and obviously you've got to be full on Keenan Allen and affect the ball, because if he gets his hands around it, you are more than likely giving up yards because of how strong his hands are and how great a catcher he is. And then you also, another one of them was one of these to DJ Moore, where he, got some good yards afterwards. But my problem with Caleb was that he consistently can't throw it down the field well. Another one of them was like triple coverage. I don't even know who it was to. There was someone there, but it was like triple coverage, and it was such a bad throw that it couldn't even be picked. Now, it's reassuring that it doesn't get picked, but that's, the good news ends there. Now, obviously, Christian Watson popped off this game. It's kind of wild to me, like, they didn't throw it as much. I don't know if, obviously the Packers had very limited drives this game. The Bears were consistently, Caleb Williams, they did not contain for him to run. That is what I'll say, is he was smart. He wasn't trying to force it. I know he said that he doesn't want to be a running quarterback. And I think it's I've said it's bizarre. Like, you don't have to be a running quarterback. And it's like, do you think people identify Joe Burrow as a running quarterback? But nah, he had a 50-yard run, weeks ago that everyone was like, oh my God. You run when you have to. And to keep your drive alive, and you're moving the chains. It's like, that's all your concern is usually on offense until you're in scoring position. So overall, I am kind of upset at the way my Packers played. It was so odd defensively. At the end of the game, obviously, they looked like they were pumped and they were ready to kind of take it to Chicago, sacking him. But then we gave up a 3rd and 19. And I don't know if it's because Hafley was worried about just one of these wide receivers, making like, the game-winning play or something, but it was like the whole game. It was kind of bizarre, when the defense had been playing so well for weeks, and obviously, holding a team to 19 is good, but the amount that they controlled the clock, like this was, the Packers had to perform very well on offense for most of their drives, and then at the very end, when like we hadn't done anything for a little while, it was just interesting. I mean, overall, I think that the pass defense was really good, surprisingly. No Chicago Bears receiver over 70 yards, and I just think that this was kind of a season defining game at this point to show what teams were lacking and what each of these teams were lacking. And the things for the Packers to me was the containment, which is odd because we've contained some mobile quarterbacks earlier this year that did not run on us. And we've played like 4 of them before Caleb. The run defense. I know that the Bears can occasionally like run it and that sort of thing, but like the run defense was less than desirable, to me. And then you look at the Bears, the being able to push the ball downfield. I think that the new offensive coordinator definitely had like a decent game plan. We'll see if it continues or if it's just a one game, adrenaline kick because, obviously Bears-Packers rivalry at Soldier Field. And, and then, the Packers. Disciplined, like I said, Christian Watson, and then, Josh Jacobs, even though I could say it was a quiet game, he was silent but deadly when they needed him to be. And he could have had a lot bigger of a game, I feel like. But the Bears seemed to prepare well for that. But interesting game. Obviously, I kind of went numb, to be honest with you, when I saw we blocked the kick, because I was thinking, like, there's no way. After watching, the Kansas City went off a block kick last week, like, 2 weeks in a row. We have a game decided by a walk-off blocked field goal, like crazy. Broncos, Falcons. This is what I've been saying about the Falcons all year. I have been saying that they go up against these teams, and the only reason Kirk performs is because these defense they don't play them tough. They do not play them tough. And you finally go up against a defense that many were saying, there's not enough talent. They got, obviously one of the best corners in the league with Pat Surtain, and whatever else. And the Broncos obviously coming off a game that, you think that they would have been able to win against the Chiefs, with that blocked field goal. But I said it, and people say, it's a week-by-week thing. Like, this isn't who the Broncos are. They're not going to be able to compete with, these top teams every single week. And I get the Falcons aren't the Chiefs. But if you had told me that, like, Bo Nix is going to go in, he's going to smother this defense to where they can't do anything, and he's going to have over 300 yards, and then they're going to have, just over 100 yards rushing total. And, none of his wide receivers are going to have over 100 yards. And then Kirk Cousins is going to just throw a pick and he's not going to, do anything. I would have thought you were kind of crazy. I did not think this game was going to be like this. But then again, it really shows what I believe about the Falcons this year. The Falcons, it's an issue. It's an issue to me. And they put in Penix at the end who, 2 of 4, 24 yards, got sacked once in those 4, those 4 dropbacks, for no loss. But Atlanta clearly can't rely on Kirk if they're not going to have a run game. They had 50 total yards running off of 21 carries. It's terrible. So it just goes to show you, to me, that like the reason why the NFC South, the reason why that division is up in the air is because the Falcons can't utilize how much talent they have to score against a tough defense. And Kirk can't be the guy. This might just be my dislike of Kirk Cousins, but I would bench him. I would bench him for Penix. I think you need something a little bit more, in your quarterback to be able to like draw a defender to have to spy because Penix is an athlete, and just overall make this offense way more dynamic. Give them a out of the pocket presence because we know that Kirk doesn't have it. But props to the Broncos. Bo Nix, if he keeps playing like this, it's going to be a toss-up between him and Jayden Daniels for Rookie of the Year. I still think Jayden Daniels has it, but Bo Nix, good quarterback. Seahawks, Niners. This game was obviously way different than their previous game. The Niners picked on the Seahawks like they had for however many games. And Geno Smith hadn't beat the Niners. They showed the stat that he had lost all 5 of the games that he played against the Niners going into this game. And don't get me wrong, he didn't play a great game, but he was pretty accurate this game. Consistently completing passes, getting his guys in position to, do things. And JSN, oh man, I'm so glad he had a pop-off game. They didn't make DK Metcalf have to have, one of these, kind of gimme touchdowns where he just beats his guy and his size is too oppressive, just for one of these plays of the game. But, they obviously had two rushing touchdowns were the only touchdowns. And then their kicker, good for their kicker to be able to come in the clutch in a hostile environment. It is not easy, especially against a team like San Fran. Brock Purdy played pretty well, but, completing his passes. But the Seahawks played really good defense where they were not letting these guys get away after the catch very much. Jawan Jennings was essentially your only guy that was trying to keep you in the game. But crazy big win for Seattle, and there's 3 teams that are 5-5 in this division, and then the Cardinals, with one more win. So crazy interesting division. I don't know who I would say is going to win it. I would have to look at schedules, to be honest. But crazy good win for Seattle. You obviously have the 1-1 against the Niners, so only conference is going to matter with seeding potentially. But I feel like it's not even going to come down to really seeding in this division because I think that only one team, maybe 2, make it to the postseason. But moving on, we have Bills Chiefs. Obviously, I watched this. I watched this game in its entirety. I was like, I'm not missing this. The Bills finally realized that we can't settle for a field goal. They're 4th and 2. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, despite them always winning in the regular season, it is still a tough matchup against, the Chiefs. And Josh Allen had the complete right mentality that he was like, oh, this probably isn't the last time. And we've got to be able to settle things outside of regular season. Because there is the monster that is the Chiefs that postseason, Chiefs is just Andy Reid really pulls out, everything and finesses so many teams. And it's like it's not over until this team is knocked out of the playoffs. And the Bills know that. But they played a very solid game. I commend them and I commend Josh Allen. He didn't have to do everything, but he sure did a lot. The interception that he had was, I was like, oh goodness, why? But then, Patrick Mahomes, he even had an interception that was like, what? But at the end of the, and I mean, they weren't able to do much offensively until late in the game. And, it just goes to show that no amount of points is almost worth it or worth, to beat the Chiefs unless, you're some crazy amount, which I just don't see with their defense. But, I'm honestly proud of the Bills. They didn't have their star tight end. Their kicker's been inconsistent for the last few weeks, which was making it tough and I think made McDermott want to go for more, but overall a very special game. That showed that, this is a team that is going to be made aware how they have to play in order to beat a team like the Chiefs. And I think that this one is huge. Obviously, the Chiefs would still have to lose another game for the Bills to have a tiebreaker. But I do think the Chiefs, they play any good teams, they're not unbeatable. And obviously, we've been talking all year about how lucky they are. Some of it may be, but then some of it is just, their unwillingness to go down ever. And that just comes down to good coaching and the belief that you can always win. But crazy good game. Goodness. Moving on to Chargers Bengals. Now this game, I thought the Chargers were going to run away with it. They were up 28-7. You look at this and I mean, I think to myself, like, obviously the Bengals, they need to win. They need to start winning or they're just, I mean, one more loss and I mean, you can practically scrap this season. Because even at 9-7, I just don't see them making it. Especially in their division. They've got, the Ravens and Steelers, that are more than likely going to make the playoffs. So it's like for a third team to make it, from your division is hard. And then the Chargers, they've really kind of developed into this team that can win a lot, has good players, and has essentially retooled all their weapons in 1 year, which is wild. And they've given the keys to Herbert, which is the way it should be, because he's really proven why he was worth that contract that people said he wasn't worth. And it's like, you tell me now, anybody that actually would still believe that he wasn't worth that contract. He's just one of the most accurate guys in the league. He can run and he does everything. He is dangerous. And I think after this year, you could be having the talk that he is one of the top 5 guys in the league. And he could, next year, I feel like he could be in the MVP conversation. His ankle injury definitely kind of hindered him early, but he's proven that he just unconscious. And, it's one of, the only missed football from him was that sideline one to McConkey where he just let it get away from him. But even Ladd McConkey, goodness, this guy, I love myself some Ladd McConkey. Unconscious at the end of the game, did really well. And then you have, J.K. Dobbins, who they didn't run it with him a lot, but comes through and keeps running hard. But overall, yeah, this team, I mean, But and I mean, the thing that I'll say is if anybody's going to try and criticize the Chargers defense, I've said this over the course of this year, but no defense can keep on holding a team, let alone the Bengals, if their offense is doing essentially nothing at the end of the game. Because these guys were up 28-7, 21 unanswered, tied. And then, 28-6, unanswered. And, Cincinnati misses a couple of field goals, which it still could have played the same way, and we could have been talking 34-33. But crazy game. And the Chargers really showed that, you can't give up in this game. And they have, quite a lot of talent, even though a lot of it is unproven. Moving on to last night, Cowboys-Texans. I thought the Texans were kind of toying around with the Cowboys. It was such a bizarre game. I'm watching it. I'm watching Peyton and Eli, and I'm, listening to Belichick, and it's just like, they're kind of joking around. And it's like, towards the end of the game when they have JJ Watt, on there as well, you get some insight into the Texans with DeMeco Ryans, and, JJ was like, oh yeah, I got a house across the street from him, because I knew that, if there's a great mind like Ryans that is, content with living here, then I can live here as well. And I think that just says, more than what can ever be said verbally about DeMeco Ryans. I think he's been a great coach. I'm glad that, they gave him some good players, but he's really outcoached, what I would have expected, to be honest with you, on their team. And I mean, they are, if you can say it, all in, but I think that they just were opportunistic with the guys they brought in. Obviously, Diggs is hurt for the rest of the year, which is unfortunate, but Joe Mixon, a guy that the Bengals didn't see fit to bring back. And I mean, you can't tell me, if you were able to get this kind of production out of Joe Mixon on a Bengals team, there's no way that they're 4-7 right now if you hadn't ever gotten rid of him. But looking at this game, I think that this showed that they have a very disciplined defense, a defense that might let up yards, because, I mean, Cooper Rush had 354 yards, threw it 55 times, of course, but, like, I think that, obviously the giveaway touchdown that the Texans just kind of blew the coverage, and, I mean, the guy has amazing speed, Turpin, and obviously that's kind of a free touchdown, but it shows the resilience of this team, that even against a team like the Cowboys, where they're gonna throw it, they have good weapons that are gonna get open. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb is kind of out there on an island for the most part. I mean, Kevontae Turpin had a good long gain, but he only had 3 targets total. And then you have Schoonmaker that had 10 targets but only 6 catches. So, crazy interesting to me that, like, they were still kind of having to play off of CD's strengths to be able to, like, move the ball at all, and then still not just not come away with points. But props to the Texans. After last week, I was kind of like, what is going on with this team? They obviously have been shooting themselves in the foot quite a bit, which still was kind of an issue this game. But, looking at this game, it's definitely a good win to gain some momentum. And moving forward, obviously now they can secure the division in probably a few games, to be honest. But that's obviously the last game of this week. If you guys want to talk about or say what your favorite games were, what you thought of Sunday's games, a very interesting week, obviously, with some of these games and some of these teams that you thought would perform better, given their situation or the matchup that they had. But it's really coming down to kind of the wire at the end of the season, and it's going to be interesting how it plays out, for a good many teams that look like they still have fire but have bad records, and then teams that look like they've really solidified themselves as playoff contenders. But tell me what you think. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. This is Cast, and I am your host, Casty Streeter. And as always, go Pack Go.